Hello and welcome back once again to our YouTube channel Oracle DBA online training. So in this session, we are going to talk about and see the complete end-to-end detail how you can perform the Oracle RAC troubleshooting. Though the title here mentioned as Oracle 19c RAC top 5 troubleshooting tips that you should be aware about, but still this is applicable for any RAC environment, including 11G, 12C, 21C, or maybe the higher version like 23AI, those latest versions of Oracle. So in this session, we are going to have a deep dive and essential technique for resolving any common RAC issues. Before we jump into this session, I would like to request all our viewers, if you have not subscribed our YouTube channel, please do subscribe. That helps us in making more such contents. It gives us inspirations for keep on working and making the videos for you guys. If you are if you're looking for any end-to-end essential training, you can enroll our membership program. You can click on the join buttons. Once you take the membership, you can basically go through our exclusive contents related to the members. Apart from this, if you're looking for our recorded courses, or if you're looking for live training, you can always enroll for live training under the training tabs, and recorded courses and VMs are available under the recorded course tab here. So under the recorded course, you'll be getting all the detailed recorded sessions along with the documentations and all those. If you're looking any documentation specific to our YouTube channel videos, you can always purchase this particular content from our website. So let's begin again with our main agenda and the goal for the session, that is how to perform the top troubleshooting with respect to RAC database. So in this complete session, I'm going to give the end-to-end information. We are going to have a live demos. And I'm going to share some of the key areas with respect to RAC troubleshooting. All right, so let's proceed with today's agenda. So before we jump into the troubleshooting area, I would like to give a quick intro about what is real application cluster, how it benefits, and what are the key things associated with the real application cluster. So if you have worked on a single instance database, you are already familiar, like one database against one server, that is your single instance database, which means all the memory and database components will rely only on one database that is known as a single instance database. Now, to give the more power to the single instance database, Oracle has given a real application cluster. Okay, so where you have high availability and scalability, which means your multiple instances will be accessing the same data, and it gives basically the more power to the users. They can connect to either of the instances in multiple instance environments. They can connect, they can perform the activities from the multiple systems. And if one of the system is unavailable for some reason, still your secondary or tertiary, depending on the number of instances that we have configured for RAC, that will allow us to access the data. So that's a key benefit of having real application cluster, that you have multiple instances working together, giving the high availability, and whenever we want, we can scale the system. Okay, we can go horizontally. We can keep on adding more servers to the existing rack, and whenever it is needed, we can reduce the number of server and the respective configurations. So this flexibility with respect to high availability, scalability will always benefit, and that's where we have the real application cluster. Now we need to understand why the troubleshooting is critical. So basically, the troubleshooting with respect to real application cluster prevents the downtime. It maintains the scalability. So when we say downtime, let's say our system 2 node rack system is working and suddenly there's a issue. Okay, so definitely if your healthy systems is working and suddenly there is something comes up in between, let's say there's a power failure happen on one of the nodes, or there's some hardware failure happens, or there's a network fluctuation happens on one of those. So how you'll find out what has caused and how we can prevent such issues in future. So that's where the troubleshooting comes. Okay, so in this session we'll be looking at those top 5 troubleshooting with respect to real application cluster, and there are some best practices that will follow, and there are commands associated with the real application cluster while doing this troubleshooting. So we'll go each and everything in details. So please do watch this video till the end so that you can understand the process of troubleshooting real application cluster. Now, as I mentioned, like the main troubleshooting areas for a real application can be divided into 5 major categories. So the first thing is basically the cluster health. So in the cluster health, generally we look for clusters availability, as well as we need to identify if there is a node eviction happens, or if there is any issue with respect to one of the nodes in the running real application cluster. Apart from this, there can be the scenario where maybe the database performance is impacted because of some query at the session level or due to high CPU utilization at the server level. Okay, so this can fall under another category of database performance issues. And apart from this, some of the common issues that a real application can be related to this CRS, or you can say cluster registry, CRS startup failures. So at the time of CRS source come up, it is possible that maybe due to some issues with respect to the resources at the server level, your system is not, real application cluster is not coming. So we need to do the validation for those. Sometimes Oracle cluster registry or maybe the voting disk is not available at that time. Also, the startup of real application cluster can be one of the problematic situation. Now, apart from this, one of the common issues with respect to real application cluster can be a network related problems where the communication between the two nodes is not happening, or it is happening, but there's some degradation with respect to uh, the zipping of packets between those two nodes. So how you'll do the troubleshooting with respect to network related issues, that is something we'll talk in details in the coming slides. Apart from this, ASM disk failure. So again, one of the issues with respect to a real application cluster, like how the ASM disk, if suppose there is a one of the ASM disk group having a problem with respect to any of the disk that got failed, because ultimately this is hardware and it can fail any day, anytime. So we need to identify like why it failed and how to overcome such situation. Okay, how we can replace the faulty disk within the ASM disk group. Okay, so these are like 5 topmost issues, or you can say troubleshooting tips that we need to go through. Okay, so let's start with first step, or first tips. So the first tip with respect to a real application cluster troubleshooting is basically checking the cluster health. Okay, so any healthy system can be achieved only if we do the monitoring regularly. So basically, for monitoring of real application cluster is associated with a, it could be related to the high memory uses. For example, let's say if we are running a real application cluster across 2 node server, okay, and suddenly we have a spike in the memory utilization on one of the nodes. So what it will impact the other nodes, it will basically the query execution, the performance on one of the problematic node will ultimately impact the other node query as well, because there is always dependency. Suppose there are one user who is accessing the data from problematic node, and ultimately there's another users running the query from the non-problematic server. So the resources or the blocks or the data that other user is looking from the non-problematic to the problematic server definitely has to wait. Okay, so there's always a dependency when we are talking about real application cluster. So if the memory uses on a particular server is high, or the CPU utilization is high on particular node, so definitely this can impact the overall performance of the real application cluster. So whenever such kind of situation arises, so first we need to check if we have any problem with respect to what you call if our system is overloaded and we need to find out what are the queries associated with the problematic node, and if we can take any action to tune that SQL that is causing more resource utilization on a particular nodes. So these are some of the common troubleshooting tips that you can follow while troubleshooting high memory uses or high CPU utilization processes on with respect to real application cluster. And also sometimes the node eviction, basically eviction is the situation where one of the nodes basically get removed from the cluster unexpectedly. So we need to overcome that situation. Okay, and also unexpected reboots sometimes happens that can also cause the problem with respect to overall cluster health problem. So cluster is basically a combination of multiple servers to working together. So if one of the servers are impacted, one of the nodes are impacted, ultimately it is going to cause a problem for others also. Okay. Now the situation, this is like some of the situation where the cluster health might be impacted. Now we need to find out how we can troubleshoot, how we can come out of this situation. So some of the things that you can follow while troubleshooting any issues with respect to cluster: you can check the cluster status itself. You can identify how many nodes are currently active in the RAC. Also, you can look for the alert logs with respect to RAC. So there is a location I have mentioned here. Also, how you can do this kind of verification. Now, real application cluster, Oracle has given one more utility, that is cluster health monitor, which is known as CHM. We can also enable this feature so that we can do the monitoring of our overall cluster with respect to RAC database. Now let's look at how to check the status of cluster. So I already have two node RAC set up here. I'll try to log in here quickly. I mean, we can see like ASM is running, one of the database instance RAC DB is running. This is node 1, and this is our secondary node where the second database instance is running. So whenever you log into the RAC environment, what you can do, you can go into the server, and then there you can find out the binaries related to the grid home. And generally, if you want to run any query with respect to root user, so what you can do, CRS-CTL is a utility, that is a cluster health cluster control utility where you can run CRS-CTL check cluster. Okay, so this will just give the generic information whether the cluster services are online. So almost there are 3 services that should be always online. So this is giving on one particular server. Same thing we can follow on the second server also. This is one of the way you can identify the check the status of the cluster. If you want to check for all the cluster status, you can include -all option that will give the status across all the nodes that you have. Now, apart from this, you can also run another command, crctl check stat resource-t. So resource-t will provide you all the resources running across node 1 and node 2, and you can find out that their current status. So here I can see the name of the resources are there when we have targeted value and the current state value. If these two values matches, it says stable. If there is a mismatch in the values, basically it will be a problematic situation. So you need to find out why this resource is having an issue and how we can fix that problem. So you need to check for the respective logs, or maybe you can look for the cluster log. So how the cluster log can be identified, you can basically you can go to the grid based location. Under that we have a diag location. There is a subdirect called CRS location. Okay, so I'll just quickly log into the grid user because currently this is running. So here you can type aura base command to identify the base location for grid user, and inside this we have diag CRS. This is server name, that is node 1 CRS trace. So your first point of checking the alert log will be under the trace. This is a cluster log for node 1. Okay, in this log file you can go to the up to the last line that will have the latest data, and that way you can identify if any problems are there in the node 1 or no. Same thing you can do on the second node also. Okay, so that's how you can basically find out any problem with respect to the cluster health while troubleshooting real application cluster problem. Apart from this, if you want to see how many nodes are there in the current cluster, you can always run this command called OLS node -n. Okay, so this will provide, and -s will also be, sorry, -s is basically, it will show whether this is active or inactive state. Okay, so that way you can identify the status of the cluster. Now let's jump to the next diagnostic related to the CRS startup failure. So sometime it happens, like let's say we have taken a restart of the server, and okay, so and while start up the CRS, it is not coming up. So what you'll do to troubleshoot this kind of issues? So in some situation, like where the cluster management software is not operational, and in another situation it can be CRS failure after the reboot. So some of the scenario where resources might be not coming up after the system server reboot. So these are some of the common issues with respect to CRS startup failure. So now how you'll do the troubleshooting? Again, you have to follow the same process that we have seen here. Let's say we are facing the issue like CRS services on the node 1 is not coming up. So your first point of contact, or first point of checks that you have to do is look into the logs, because log is the file that will provide you the complete information why the particular service is not coming up, or where the problem starts. Okay, so you need to find, first look at the CRS log, and if you're troubleshooting the issues with respect to startup, so another file that can be helpful is CRS SD log. Okay, again, this is present within the same alert log location that we have checked a few minutes back. Now, sometime what happens at the time of CRS startup, maybe the voting disk is available or not available. So you can always list out it with the help of ASM CMD command. So ASM CMD, and then we have ls. This one is not working here. Yeah, so sometime we need to identify whether the disks are available. So lsdg can be one of the commands. LSOF can be another commands, and lsdsk is another command that will help you to identify if disks are there or not. Okay, so this way we can identify the details about the. Yeah, this way we can identify the detail about the disk availability, because voting disk and OCR file should be available. And I think this is the name of disk group that we have mentioned. Let's OCR. Yeah, so you can list down all the disk groups, whether they are available or not available with lsdg. lsdsk is another command that you can use to identify. Okay, so if the disks are available, you can find the path associated with this, and you can also list out the permission related information with respect to the disk. So ideally, the disk should be owned by the grid and install group users. If there is a permission related issues after the server reboot, you can always find out this details. Now, one of the pro tip that I will recommend here, that we should have some automated process. Maybe you can you can define some you can define a shell script that will monitor your CRS alert logs, and it can identify a particular error message from the alert log of CRS, and it should send a notification whenever there is some alert is triggered. Or maybe the best option you can have, you can schedule, you can have a jobs running from OEM or that will notify whenever there's a problem associated with the CRS offline. If any services goes down, or during the time of startup, if it gives some error, so you can always schedule those jobs within the OEM utility. Now, the next step that we are talking about is how to resolve the network and interconnect issue. I mean, if you're working on any real application cluster, I mean, at least once in a lifetime, you might come across a situation where the network related issues arise, and that has impacted the overall infrastructure of RAC database. It could be a latency issue. It could be the node eviction due to the hardware failure. Okay, and there can be n number of examples, and I mean, most of the time it happens if there is some glitch in the networks. Sometimes the sockets associated with the private interconnect might have some buggy behavior, or over the period of time those network devices might be faulty, because ultimately it's a hardware, it cannot run I mean, for lifetime. So we have to definitely do some maintenance as well as with respect to the network interconnect. Okay, so the network pipelines that we have, I mean, I'm talking from what you call and the wires that is used to do the communication between these two servers, the fiber optic connections. So all those things we have to consider into the factor whenever we are facing the issues with respect to the network or interconnect issues. So we talked about the issues with respect to network. There can be physical device malfunctioning, that can disrupt the network flow, or it can be a configuration issues with respect to, let's say, incorrect settings leading to the connectivity problems, or it can be a latency problems. So delay in the data transmission can affect the performance, or it could be a packet loss. So sometimes if your network or is very busy while transmitting the data, I mean, there might be the situation where the data might be lost due to a loss in the packets during the transmissions due to multiple factors. Okay, so whenever this kind of situation arises, ultimately it will impact your cluster, because in rack environments, interconnect has a very significant role to play. So whenever this kind of situation arises, the first thing you can try and test is try to do the ping of interconnect IP addresses. Okay, so before you jump to the interconnect IP address, you need to know what are the interconnect IP addresses. So for that purpose, you have this command called OCI if sorry, get information with respect to the IP address. So this is our interconnect IP address. Now this is the basically the what do you call the network subnet for interconnect. Now you need to also identify what are the IP addresses associated with the interconnect. So generally what we do, we can identify such information from etc host, where the private IP address with respect to RAC is mentioned. Suppose if you are on the first node, you will try to ping this private IP address of the second node. Okay. So in ideal world situation, there shouldn't be any drop of the packet happens between the nodes, between the two nodes. Okay, and the result should be within the less than 1 milliseconds. You can see the timing is very important. If it goes beyond 5 milliseconds, definitely there's a problems. There shouldn't be no extra hops while the transmitting the data between the nodes. Also, you can also run the if config command with -a and look for any errors. For example, we are on this node 1 and we can run if config -a grep. Okay, so if any errors are there, that will be listed here, and accordingly you need to find and do the troubleshooting. Now, the pro tip here is that while you're, requesting for network configuration with respect to RAC, you have to intimate your network engineers and network counterparts that the MTU size should be 9,000. Okay, it basically it indicates how big the data can flow over the network interconnect channel. Okay, so MTU value should be always 9,000 because the default value is 1500. For example, in my environment, I have not modified this value. So you can see the MTU value is currently 1500, including for private interconnect also. Okay. This is a private IP address for node 1, and currently the MTU size is 1500. Because here I have not done any server level hardening. I'm not defined anything specific to 9000. I mean, the MTU size is not defined to 9000. Basically, it is known as jumbo frames. So the size of the packets that will be sent over the networks will be defined with the help of this jumbo frame size. So it should be always 9000 to avoid any kind of. Again, if you are facing the issues with respect to interconnect issues between the two node rack environment or three node rack environments, always look for the CRS log. CRS log is the first point to identify some of these issues, where you'll find out the threshold alerts, like the communication or the heartbeat is failure happens for particular time frame. All those messages will be printed in the alert log of the CRS. You can look for first node or second node. The message should be there in either of the nodes. Okay, so that's how you do the troubleshooting with respect to network and interconnect issues. Now, the fourth point with respect to the database performance. So far, whatever we have talked about, it is something related to either hardware failure or maybe like infrastructure level problems, or it could be network level problem. Now, the database performance can also impact the real application cluster behavior. Okay, suppose we have two node rack setup, and one of the node is processing one of the query that is taking more resources, and maybe the query is not tuned, or if the query is running for a very long period of time, that has a dependency on the another node. So overall, this kind of situation can be a problematic. Also, it can be a like unbalanced workload. So sometimes it happens like if you have two node rack, our application team has, they're just trying to connect to only one specific node, and because of that situation, your one of the server might be doing extra work compared to the other. By default, if your users are connecting using the, what do you call it, scan IP addresses or a scan name into the connection string, so the request will go into either of the nodes, and that is something auto balanced by the real application cluster. But if suppose we have utilized like preferred node kind of configuration, or maybe like with the help of a specific service, users are connecting to only one specific node, they are running the query on only one nodes, that kind of situation might do the unbalancing of workload. And sometimes it can also be problematic with respect to high CPU utilization or high resource utilization on one of the nodes. And there can be other situation also, like query workload might be not distributed properly, or it can be like unbalanced workloads. Okay, so by looking at all these factors, you can say like if such kind of situation arises, so what are the things that you'll do to troubleshoot? Okay, so the first thing, you can find out how many connections are there on what node. Okay, so if you are working on real application cluster, so you'll run this query, select instance ID and number of connection from $$ session group by instance ID. So what it will do, it will show you the total active. You can give the one more condition here. You can include the status option like active, inactive basis, and accordingly you can find out how many sessions are there on node 1 or node 2, like that. So when you run these queries, you will find out how many sessions are active on a specific node, and after that, you need to find out what you can make. Things to be balanced. Okay, so maybe sometime it happens like, let's say suddenly there was one of the node was rebooted, and when the node comes up, all the connection might be on node 2 only. Okay, because the node 1 was down for some reason, and during that restart phase, all the application connections landed to node 2. By default, Oracle will try to rebalance. Sometime rebalancing operation doesn't work, so in such scenarios, we might have to restart an application servers, okay, just to rebalance the thing. So uh, in balancing situation, basically the query might be impacted on with a heavy workloaded servers, and that can impact the other servers. The well performing servers can be also impacted. So it is our responsibility to identify how many active sessions or inactive sessions are there on a particular node. If there is a large gap of connection with respect to nodes, you need to basically try to balance them. So sometimes if balancing the automatic balancing at Oracle doesn't work, then you have to basically take the help of application users and ask them to take the restart of application, obviously one by one, and one server at a time, and then we can check whether the load balancing is completed or not completed. Okay, so you can do those kind of troubleshooting, and also you can monitor the CPU utilization, because if your server is highly utilized, definitely it will have the direct impact on the CPU. So you can identify which process is basically consuming more resources and all those things. And also you can try adjusting the services and the load balancing operation. And one of the pro tip in this case will be use preferred node to optimize the workload. Okay, so yeah, these are the things that we have now. This is with respect to database performance. Obviously there can be other scenarios as well, like we can try to troubleshoot any queries that is running for a very long period of time. We can find out if we can optimize that query with the SQL tuning advisories, and then we can do the more we can improve the performance of overall database in that scenario. Now the next pro tip, basically with respect to RAC troubleshooting, is handling the ASM disk failure. So one of the not very common issue, but sometimes it happens. Like let's say a particular disk is went for offline, and maybe there's some issue with respect to the disk failure, or there's IO errors coming. Okay, like so how you can identify those issues with respect to ASM disk issues. So recognize the common ASM disk problems and checking the ASM disk status. We need to check first, verify whether the disks are available. If they are available, if they have the proper permissions, or we can try attempting like bringing up the disk group online if it went to offline state. If the disks are in the faulty state, okay, if the system is unable to read the disk, then definitely we have to use add and replace the faulty disk. So drop the faulty disk, add the new disk. And sometime we should always ensure the integrity before any operation. So if you are making any major changes with respect to RAC database, you should always take the backup of OCR and voting disk, which is your very critical and cluster registry files and voting disk files that maintains the membership information of RAC database. So those two important files should be always backed up before we do any. It should be always multiplexed. So it should be like it should be available across multiple disks. In case of any failure happens on one of the disk, still we can get the data available. So whenever this ASM related issues comes, definitely you can look for ASM CMD LSDG, that will provide you the list of disk status. We have already executed some of those commands here. We can go back and see the details. So LSDG will list out all the disk group names with the current state. So ideally it should be mounted across all the nodes. If it is not, we have to mount them manually. So the command for mounting the disk will be alter disk group name mount. If you want to mount across all the nodes, you have to mention all. So suppose if there is one of the disk that is not responding, so what you can do, you have to add the new disk and drop the disk. So nowadays we have a command where you can add the new disk and drop the existing disk. So alter disk group name, drop disk name, and you can also include add commands here. Add disk name and rebalance operation. So what happens it will automatically take the new disk into the consideration, and whatever the data was there in the previous disk, or the faulty disk, that will be rebalanced back to the new disk, and it will be dropped from the existing disk group. So the pro tip, whenever you're dealing with ASM disk related situations, you should always take the backup of OCR and voting disk before doing any major changes. And obviously, you can also look for the alert logs of ASM. So if you are logged in as a grid users, you can always run ADRCI, that is automatic diagnostic. I mean, for command line interface, there you can type show help or show home. Sorry, that will provide you the home location for because we are in the already in the CRS location, so that's why it's not showing that home. So here we can see like ASM alert log path is this one. If I exit and CD to that path, with the help of this, you can always explore the detail about the alert log. So in this, you can find out when the disk is come up, or maybe when the disk is down, disk group. So all those information we can pull it from the ASM alert log. So whenever you are facing any issue with respect to ASM disk, you can first look into the alert log of CRS as well as alert log of ASM, and accordingly you can do the troubleshooting. So with this, these are the top 5 troubleshooting with respect to real application cluster. I hope you have understood the process. And in summary, the key takeaway will be like a regular check of the cluster health and monitoring of interconnect performance. So again, I mean, if you are new to our YouTube channel, please do subscribe for more such contents, and check our, documentation with respect to our this particular video. You can avail, you can purchase from our website, Oracle DBA YouTube videos related documents. If you are looking for recorded course, this is ultimate recorded course, advanced version, where you will get everything within the one single course. You can follow as per your pace. It contains more than hundreds of hours of training materials, as well as interview questions, lifetime access, documentation, SE recordings. Everything is included. Following topics have been covered. If you're a beginner, you can still purchase this course. So thank you once again for watching this video. Please do subscribe and share this video. If you have enjoyed this session, please do like and share within your friend circle. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Have a wonderful day.